All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of XS Exceed. This is Gearface. I still haven't learned how to play this game yet, so I've got another guy here teaching me. Once again, it's Petersonian. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, glad to be here.
And today, Petersonian and I are talking about Axl, the second, maybe the second zoneriest zoner to ever do it after our wildly successful New 13 lesson last time. I've got him back on to discuss another person who's going to hit you with things at range 8. Super
hmm
excited about this one. Don't know a ton about Axl. As I say in almost every episode, don't know a ton about insert character here is becoming my catchphrase. Yeah. Uh, as always, disclaimer before we get started. Number one, we're going to be talking about playing to win. That's not the only way to play Exceed. You can definitely play it for fun, and in fact, I encourage you to play it for fun because when you do that, you might have fun. If the lines of play that we describe aren't fun to you or don't sound interesting, please don't play that way. Don't think that don't think that this is like the big air quotes right way to play Axl. It's just the one that you do if you want to win according to how Petersonian has seen it. And that segues into disclaimer number 2. We tend to talk pretty prescriptively on this show. You'll hear Petersonian say things like, always do this, never do this. Always spend your resources this way, never this way. Um, always take that with a grain of salt. That's, Exceed's not a solved game. I'm not an expert at all. Petersonian is an expert, but even his opinion is just an informed one. It's not law by any means. We cannot arrest you for playing the character wrong. And in fact, if we have underrepresented something about the character, there's a decent chance that we have,
No,
right? This is a flexible
if you
character in a
post in the YouTube comments, we promise to ignore it.
yeah, that's true. But seriously though, I love engagement.
And they'll
I
feel better about themselves at least.
Yeah, the algorithm must be fed. Please comment on all of the reasons why we're wrong about Axl. But for real, turning this into a conversation is
Good.
how all of us
Create
learn about this
outrage. I think this is how
character.
we started the last video.
Yes,
Axel's a
exactly.
brawler.
Yeah. Let's just start doing horrible hot takes again. All right. With all that said, Petersonian, take it away. Tell me about Axl.
Okay. Well, yeah. So we'll have to hit this video interesting because, on one hand, it is almost a sequel to the new video, but also some people might be watching this and have not watched the new video. So we'll
Right.
have to thread a needle here, because a lot of the lessons that you can take from new and apply to Axel are extremely relevant, because Axel is much like new, a zoner. Like he's a zoner. Being uninteractive helps. If you even, yeah, I see you just pulled out the character
Right. Right.
card.
Right.
Even if you look at their two character cards side by side and look at their abilities, Axel's ability gives him +0 to 2 range on his normals. New's ability can give you +3 to 4 range, or on flip side, +0 to 4 range. So this whole, like, I want to be over here and hit you from over there and abuse the speed curve to play things that are faster than your things, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
Both of these characters are doing that. However, unlike New 13, Axel is a season 7 character, which brings with it a whole different dynamic to, like, how the characters interact with their cards and the boosts and with the season in general. Because whereas season 5 was built on, I guess we'll call, like, the original normal boosts,
Right.
the default normals, which seasons 1 through 5 used. So, sweep having light on it, +2 speed, uh, reading, existing, all those things, right? Uh, Season 7 has an entirely new set of normals, and with it, a new mechanic, canceling, and we can get into that with Axel. It changes the game.
Right. So similar mindset about keeping your opponent at a range where all right, so looking at Ryu, my training dummy over here, the longest range thing that he has in his kit hits to range 6, and
Yes.
he has 2 copies of that, and after those 2 things are gone or something, something has gone horribly wrong and he's missed his Hadokens or something like that, he basically has meaningful aggression out to range 4. Axel can
Almost
conceivably,
always has aggression out to range 8, which is
yeah,
more than new.
Yeah,
New, for the most part, consistently has aggression from range 5 to 7.
right. So Axel can pretty consistently um threaten in situations where his opponent really can't do anything about it. Like they just can't interact and they need to spend their turn getting to a place where they can interact with him.
Mhm.
And it's his job to sort of turn the game into it like as one player a game as he possibly can afford to do by keeping his opponent out of a range where they can threaten him back. So similar mindset
Exactly.
between these
Similar
two.
mindset. And before
Different.
we put New away,
Sure.
we'll just real quick, one last thing, kind of recap New's weakness is New's got blind spots, right? Is
Right.
you move within her band on front side, and there are places that she can't hit you as reliably, and so you get to threaten things. We can put New away now because Axel circumvents a lot of those blind spots, has his own blind spots, but he's a whole different beast beyond that.
Okay.
So yeah, let's start. So Axel's game plan is to exceed as fast as possible. Because if you start with this character ability, you normals have +0 to 2 range, which is incredible.
Yep.
Grasp hits at range 3, Cross hits at range 4. Your dive and your assault obviously hit from 2 spaces further out. So you can even dive over a person from range 1 and you will hit them after crossing over them. So you get to
Right.
both dodge your sweep and do all this. However, on front side, all of his normals have -1 speed. And that really noticeably hurts you.
Yeah.
So when you exceed, yes, you draw 2, yes, you retreat up to 2. It's great. It's like a little tempo boost because you almost will kind of spend your cards as quickly as possible in the opening rounds trying to get to that 3 gauge so you can flip over because now your ability becomes your normals have +0 to 2 range with no penalty.
With no downside at all, right. So even on
Yes.
front side, if I'm using my normals at their new best ranges, if I am
Mhm.
grasping at range 3, I am still above curve because 2 range and -1 speed equals out to be a 6 speed range 3 option that's above curve. But
Sure.
when but
You've got
when
your speed
I'm
curve,
yeah,
7, 6, 5, right? 5's out
right.
here. This is sick out here where
And
most cards are range 5. Cross is speed 5 where most cards are out at range 4.
at speed
Or
4,
yeah,
right.
speed 4, range 4.
Yeah. So at my best in my best case scenario with this, my normals are breaking the speed curve without you know without any sort of
Yeah.
like resource expenditure on my part, just kind of for free. I get to do that. But
Yeah.
as soon as my opponent gets within that range band, this is almost all downside because
Yes.
I'm not getting anything extra out of it, and my stuff is worse.
And once again, this is kind of a jumping off point while we're within the context of season 7. So the cancel mechanic, which the little clock timey thing down here, which everyone watching this video probably is familiar with because I don't know who are we making these videos for.
Right.
But the cancel mechanic, which lets you spend a gauge immediately after resolving your boost to take another action. You have characters with everyone has access to dash, advance 3, cancel, take another action. A lot of characters have similar movement boosts. And so Axel, unlike the sort of the environment that New was born into where she could push you out to a range and then you had to waste a turn coming in
Right.
and then she could do something in response. Characters can much more easily and quickly compress that action into now I'm right next to you and it's my turn again and I'm attacking you, and all of your normals are now below the speed curve, and I'm going to take advantage of that. So
Right. So
that's what Axel has to worry about.
basically anybody over in this season at all can, if they decide to, uh, action compress their way. They can spend their resources in such a way almost all the time to make this ability a liability before it's a more often than it's a benefit. They might take some resources to do it, but because this is such a big weak point of his, they're probably going to do it.
Yeah, and Axl's biggest weakness is that first 3 gauge he's trying to create.
Okay.
If you can put the squeeze on him and either not allow him to exceed or delay his exceed or force him, I mean, it'd be great. Whenever you can force him to spend gauge to cancel before he flips, you're delaying his power spike. And so that's typically your counterplay to Axl. And it's what
Okay.
Axl's trying to, if it's the counterplay, right? Then your job as an Axl player is to mitigate that as much as possible and to ensure that you're getting your gauge as quickly as possible.
Okay. That makes sense. So you are basically like you're obviously you're rushing your exceed mode over every other consideration, and your opponent is trying to stop you by basically making you play neutral. And because of the way that season seven's neutral is kind of defined by canceling,
Yep.
if they are able to put you in a scary situation where you actually need to avoid some of their aggression by advancing out of the corner or something with
Hmm.
dash, as you just mentioned, and then canceling to maintain something, that's slowing you down enough that they might be able to keep up. But once you flip,
Yeah.
now this is all upside. And now you have, as you mentioned, pretty much free ability to break the speed curve. Sweep catches cross even at range 2. That's crazy.
It's
Um,
awesome.
yeah. So just when you put range on normals, they get
Yeah.
they get
Spike.
they
I
get
mean,
silly pretty fast. Yeah.
if you initiate with Spike and they're at range 5, there's very little most characters can do.
Right. Yeah. They dive in and they still get hit. They
Yep.
they cross out. Okay, now they're probably in the other corner because if
Yeah.
they were already at
And
range
then I
5,
think
there's not
they'll
much
hit
where
you
to
at range
go.
8.
Yeah,
Yep.
you probably don't want to cross out against the zoner. Okay, so
Yeah.
basically everything
Now,
benefits from his exceed ability.
yeah, and then the caveat there, since we're kind of talking about this, there's what's the structure to this video? Is that if he's playing against another zoner, though, he will struggle at that farther range because the tools that he has out there are more harassing tools and not as much damage tools.
Okay,
And so for example, Testament. Testament, and even New,
mhm,
having played this matchup into New a few times, despite Axl having that range 8 superiority, where at range 8 he can hit better than New can. New doesn't care because very rarely are you just at the opposite corners of the board wailing on each other. The majority of the game, you're much more in a closer band, and because New's ability reaches further than this +0 to 2 range, and her specials are designed to hit at further ranges with her
right,
ability. She just will do more damage at a further range than Axl will.
right,
And so Axl will actually, in a zoner matchup, have to come in and brawl, which is an interesting dynamic in a character like this.
right. And I mean when you have extra range on normals, like you don't have to play this like mid speed or this mid range keep away game with this.
Nope.
Normals with extra range are great brawling tools. You can
Yeah.
just win with
Grasp
that.
at range 2, awesome.
Sure.
Subdue
Yeah.
at range 2, right? Assault coming in from range 4, you now are at range 2 and you hit and you've got an advantage and do your whole thing. Like, it's all good stuff.
Right.
Okay. Well, so let's take this in 2 different methods then. So we'll do Zoner Axl, Brawler Axl, right?
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So your Zoner Axl tools, you've got Cross, you've got Grasp, um, you've got Snail, Sickle Flash, Winter Mantis. I'm going to extend your range over there. If you can move over that, we'll do this.
Yeah, that works.
There you go, right? So these 5 right here are your most important kind of the zone harass, right? Which,
Right.
if you're trying to play Axl in the mode of I want to be as uninteractive as I can, this is what you're looking for, right?
Okay.
Is so you've got Snail, which, let's say you're still on front side, you have a 2 to 3 3/6.
Yeah.
Right, it is wildly above curve at range 3, or not wildly, but it's above curve at
It's
range
above
3,
curve and
and it pushes.
it pushes. Yeah, it's title
You
world.
beat sweep. Yeah, you beat sweep. You draw 1. It keeps your resources going. You have the gauge, um, and so you don't have to worry about, say, dropping grasp. Like, you can use this. Grasp will do something similar. It'll hit at range 3. It'll be speed 6 on front side, push or pull, right? But you can kind of save your grasp for when you're flipped, and then it's a speed 7, range
Right.
3, push or pull, right? Which is great.
Right.
So
And it
Snail is
and it
almost
and
like
it
a
hit
little like,
and it hits at range 1 if you need it to.
and it hits a range 1, which Snail does not, right? But
Right,
Snail
right.
is this kind of, I'm trying to get my gauge. It also will stop people who are trying to assault in, because most characters don't have above curve range 3 options, right? It's not a typical thing. So being able to mash this is a strong defensive tool. It's also fine on offense if you're able to push them into the space. And it gets you that gauge and it gets you cards. So like, great, non-interactive keep away. Grasp for all the same reasons we just mentioned. Very similar roles, non-interactive keep away. Cross from another space further out, because this is great, round 1. Someone plays something or you're initiating, mostly initiating, because there's a lot of characters and it feels like more and more of them have we call it fast dive.
Fast dive, yeah,
So a
exactly.
range 4, speed 5. So on defense, turn 1, don't play cross unless the character doesn't have that. But initiating, it's your fast dive that goes backwards, so now you have more space and you can play your other cards for longer, right? It's good. Cross is
Right.
good.
Right.
Then Sickle Flash. So Sickle Flash is his, I guess, signature card, if we have to call it that, because he has 4 of them.
Okay.
So where he has 2 of every other card, he has 4 Sickle Flashes. So he has a 32 card deck. 3 to 8, 2 damage, 5 speed. I'm sure you covered this in another video, but if someone's hearing for this for the first time, the 2 power is very deliberate, and it's a power you should be looking at, because where if you have an EX that you can play defensively, your EX won't get stunned because that 1 armor and 1 guard you get from it, even if you had no guard before that, you won't get stunned and your card gets to still happen. Now, if Axel's hitting you with this at range 3, whatever, right? 3, 4, 5. If you EX dive, you're still not hitting, right?
Because of the
But
push.
because of the push, but you're still going to advance 3. So you decide if that's worth it for you, but it's worth considering, right? Like, you
Right.
can EX through this if you need to make up that distance. It's kind of that grappler movement,
Right,
that we
right,
talked about,
right.
which is the reverse of all this, right?
Right, yeah.
But then it's also a bit of a kind of a not cash out, but like, you can press your advantage if you've gotten them all the way away from you. If they're in the corner,
They're all the way over
it
there,
gives you
right.
+2 power. If they play focus, you get to do at least 2 damage to them.
Right.
That's really where it comes in. That +2 power won't come into play too much, but this is very much like, if you look at Snail, Grasp, Sickle Flash, Cross, 3 power, 3 power, 3 power, 2 power, maybe 4 power, death by
Right.
1,000 cuts.
Right.
You know, that's what it is. You're not doing a lot of damage, and so you will very rarely win a game just doing this.
Just zoning, right. But because you're these are all above or on curve options, they are fast things, in these cases, when we're talking about this in particular, there's definitely some periods where these are liabilities. But when you're playing them at range 2 and range 3, when you're playing these things at range 3, things like that, these also are getting you gauge very consistently.
Yeah. And again, we
And
said, like, in the beginning, you want to be playing all this from range 2 to 3,
right,
right?
right,
You need to. This one from even further out.
right,
So if they're not at range 3, sorry, if they're not at range 1, you're mashing something and you're hoping to generate gauge, and maybe you trade a little bit. Your hope is that you'll eventually hit that 3 gauge and then become even more uninteractive for as long as you need to be.
right. And you might be trading down with, although I mean a range 2 or range 3 grasp is unlikely to trade down, because it is just like it's tough to stop that, because you can push and things like that. But
Yes.
with these fast options, these are very solid gauge generating tools, because even if they do trade down, they're probably going to hit, and that's
And
kind
if
of
you
what you're
look at
looking
this
for.
too, I mean, push or pull, retreat. The
Retreat,
idea
yeah,
is you're creating distance.
yeah,
Everything here is creating distance. Well, eventually, you need to switch modes.
Okay.
So we'll shift this over here. There's our ranged harass. This is range 1 to 2, but it's not really. Because if
Right.
you read the character, read the effect, right? Ignore armor, ignore guard before pull 8 without pulling past yourself, hit advance 2. It is a cross screen command grab.
Right.
So if you sickle flashed them across the board and grasped them across the board, or you hit them for cross and you went all the way across the board, right? You can essentially cash out with this. 5 damage is more than you've been doing for a long time, right? That
Right.
is a sixth of their life. You hit with 2 of this and you've done a third of their life. Like, this is a great card.
Right.
So if you can get them out there and keep them out there, it's good.
Right.
If
So
they're another zoner, they'll have an answer to this.
right, because two speed with no guard on it at a range when you can actually hit back is not
Yep.
hard to beat. But
Nope.
sometimes the character might not be able to hit back.
Sometimes they can't hit back. Most zoners will have something, and like we said, you're probably not at range 8, right? You're
Right.
probably at range 5 to
6 or
6,
something. Right.
and
Sure.
a character like Testament, we'll just use them because they're another zoner in the season, right?
Yeah.
Is they have plenty of fireballs that'll hit you at this range at more than 2 speed.
Sure.
I
Sure.
think even their slowest one is like 3 speed. So
Yeah.
this is a liability, which is why it's great that it's also a boost.
Right.
Spend up to 2 force. For each force spent, push 1 and draw 2. So to resurrect New into the conversation, last video I made with you, we talked about how New's biggest weakness was her economy
Econ.
and
Sure.
not having one. Axel's like, what if I did? What if I got to push you away from me and get double the return on my force investment?
Right. Right. So when you're using Winter Mantis as an attack, I assume then. So if we're in this position, if Ryu and Axel are in this position, and I swing Winter Mantis and I hit, going all the way over here, and then
Yep.
I go here, and so now we're at
Yep.
range 2, and I've sort of semi cornered them. I assume then
Yes.
that this is something that you are doing when it is time for you to transition into brawling mode, which is kind of why you put him between these different
Yes.
like axes of Axel's game plan. So
Absolutely.
does that mean that this is much more of a threat when I'm in exceed mode, because that's when I'm much more comfortable brawling because my normals don't have that speed penalty anymore?
So sure. I mean, game to game, everything changes, right?
Right.
someone, someone, let me know. I'm sure they've done it. Someone probably has won a front side Axel game. I'm happy for them. Like, good,
Right.
right?
Right.
It
Right.
can happen. That's awesome. You are going to exceed as Axel. Like,
Okay.
it's almost guaranteed. You've got enough of these tools. You will hit eventually. We haven't really gotten into the boost over here, and we'll get into that in a second. But like, you're going to exceed.
Right.
So I don't know. I've never really been in a position where I was like, oh, should I Winter Mantis? I'm not exceeded yet. Like, it's just you kind of just play it as it comes, right?
Okay.
Um, but anyway, yeah. So this is a transition, or it's a game closer, or it's the 5 damage that you desperately needed. But either way, you are right. This is going to transition you now into range 2 melee,
Right.
right? I've definitely been sad sometimes where I've played this and the person just played focus, and then you just whiff.
Right.
And then you lost a really good source of damage and a really good boost. So I guess watch out for that. But then if they focus all the way out here and you're over here, they're still out there. So
So you're probably, again, other than in those zoner to zoner matchups, you are still maintaining your preferred range for this part of your kit, where you're at least just trying to pester them.
yeah,
But
as long as you still
you
have
didn't get
single flashes up, as long as you still, you can do your thing.
yeah, you didn't get your payout, but you did stun their focus, which doesn't happen super
No,
often.
no, you don't stun their focus if they're out here because you didn't pull
Oh,
them. If
you don't
if
even
you are
hit,
more
of
than 2
course,
spaces
of
away,
course, of
you don't
course.
pull them because focus doesn't get pulled. So
Yeah,
that's a very intentional design, right? It's
right,
not
right.
range 1 to 8, hit, pull 8. It's before pull 8, and you
Before
just
pull
can't.
8, right? That makes sense. Okay,
And it's thematic because it's the command grab. They hit you with the chain and
and
pull you
then
all the way in.
pull you in, right? That makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. You're done. Rainwater bridges the gap here, right? Rainwater is before you may retreat one, hit retreat one. This is almost identical to that new card in how it's used.
Right.
News is 2 to 3.
It's
Someone else can go look at that again.
it's
We're not gonna pull it up.
super rage, I think it
Super
is.
Rage.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Super Rage.
Yeah.
So very similar. Make some space, hit, make some more space. News pushes, I think. It's like hit you may retreat. Sorry, before you may retreat, hit push. But either way, it's the same
Right.
kind of deal, right?
Right.
It's an on curve fireball that puts you at range 5, or it's a mid speed that puts you at range 3 to 5.
Right. Right.
It's good. It's a
Yep.
good card. I find myself typically boosting with it more often than I strike with it, because why would I play something safe or on curve when I can play something above curve and much safer, right?
Right.
Like, so
Sure.
you've got options. And that boost is incredible. +1 speed, now advance to retreat 1, and it's
And it's
cancelable.
cancelable. Yeah.
So now I'm even faster and safer and further away or closer depending on my needs. So I mean, it's a good attack, but you'll almost always boost this one.
Okay.
So whatever. You don't mind wild swinging this if you wild swing it, sort of deal, right?
Right. Right.
It is what it is. Um, okay. So all that. How does he brawl? He brawls because he still has normals. You very much succinctly put it that like normals with any range on them are still great at range 1 to 3.
Yep.
So like if you're exceeded, you don't care if you're range 1 to 3. Like you can cook. Like you
Right.
got plenty of good stuff. You also have Axle Bomber and One Vision and Sickle Storm. Because also typically, if you're deciding to come into melee, you've already exceeded, you've been uninteractive for a while, you probably have some gauge. Like it is not uncommon to get the 3 gauge to exceed, you retreated, you've hit them a few more times, you've kept like that whole cat and mouse, right? You can
Right.
keep it going for a while. And so it's very often I have enough gauge to play Sickle Storm when I go melee. Like
Okay.
very, very often. Less often do I have the gauge to play One Vision, because 4 is a lot,
Yeah.
right? You would have to have hit 5 to 7 times depending on which boosts you hit with, et cetera, right? But like that's a lot. If you can hit with One Vision, and it's a lot easier than you think, gosh, that card's incredible.
Yeah.
It's the dream. Like if you're Axel and you hit with this card, uh, you win the next strike,
Yeah.
and
And maybe the game, right? Like the
maybe
like
the game.
there's something that I know that Poulter says sometimes, that like there's not a lot of 4 gauge ultras that you can hit with and then lose afterward. Like
Absolutely.
yeah, this
And
is
for
we'll get to it when we talk about the boost, but this is pretty brutal.
and when you get to the point where you can play One Vision, and I mean, a lot of times I just my brain can't play it raw. I have to wait for it to be EX. So
EX,
like I'm waiting for
sure.
the 4 gauge. I'm waiting for the EX because then it's on curve, or I've got
Right.
what like or I want to play the +1 speed and then cancel. So I need 5 gauge, right,
Right.
to get in there
Right.
and do it. So very often I'm hitting this. The number of times, let's put it this way, the number of times that I've hit with One Vision, gotten excited, then realized that I won the game that strike and didn't get to use the boost is like more than 4.
It's yeah, it's a non-zero amount of times that
It's
One
the
Vision.
non-zero number that I go, yes! Oh,
Oh
I
man.
lost the game. And you'll never be more disappointed to lose the game than hitting with One Vision and then
Or
winning.
or
Like,
to yeah,
or sorry, to win
to
the
win the
game.
game. Yeah, I get you.
It's the most disappointed you'll ever be to win is hitting
So
with One Vision for Fatal.
so these are my brawling tools, and unlike with Winter Mantis, like the range on these, other than Sickle Storm, isn't lying to you. Like these actually are 1 to 2, 1 to 3 range tools.
Yep.
And I'm going to be playing them when it's actually time to fight up close. So
Yes.
when we're talking about like before Exceed side, when things aren't going well for me, right? I'm being pressured. This doesn't benefit at all from my Exceed side. It benefits from the situation that I'm okay with being in my Exceed side. So if I get cornered,
Yeah.
I can just put this down, and it's part of my, like, I don't know if it's like exactly a get out of jail free card. Like I mean, it's Not
No, because a lot of times it ends up being pretty face up, especially on front side, because you
okay.
don't have the speed penalty. Sorry,
Y-
because you have the speed penalty on your normals. So a lot of times you'll play something
like
and they'll be
this.
like, well, it's just Axle Bomber.
Right.
So you have to be careful of that. Axle Bomber, you'll see a lot of people just dive over you when you play this,
Sure.
or just play Grasp and
Right.
then you don't hit, or play
Right.
Cross. Like, so there is a benefit to kind of you know, play the mix up.
Yeah.
You go to range 1 and then slam a 1 speed sweep that hits to range 5, right?
Five.
Or go
Sure.
to range and play your 6 speed grasp and beat their cross. Like, so there is a bit of, Yomi that happens
Right.
with Axel Bomber in relation to it, but it's a good card. And it's possibly 6 power, which, if you've been looking at all your other cards outside of your
Uh,
cross screen command grab, like,
right.
this is where your damage is locked
Right. Right. Okay.
and your normals.
So I'm more able to play this card in Exceed mode because there are other things that it could be that I would feel comfortable attacking with. So my opponent is like, oh man, it's not obviously Axel Bomber anymore. It could actually just be a bunch of normals that are now much better.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then also, uh, well, we'll finish this. We'll finish One Vision and Sickle Storm, and then we'll talk about
Yes.
the boosts.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like
Actually,
Axel Bomber, you nailed it. Like, it's pretty face up until it's not, right? So
right.
like, you need to make sure you're unpredictable. You can't just be slamming it and let them like just call you out on it,
Right.
because you're also very sad to see this go down.
Okay. What about the hit effect? So I mean, everything that you were saying about like your first several gauge, your first free gauge for exceeding, I assume if you hit with this, if you wild swing with this and hit or something on front side, or even if if you do the mix up correctly, one gauge for advantage, unless you have a lot of ways to capitalize on that right now, is getting you farther away from your exceed mode. Do
So
you do
possibly. So
okay,
hit advance 2, you miss one gauge. Do it if it's gonna help you make more space. Like, if you can crossover and then maybe you've got grasp. Grasp at range 2 is still 6 speed, right?
right,
If they don't have focus, or you're not afraid of focus, or you're willing to trade into focus, like, maybe that's the thing you do. Maybe
right, okay,
you hop over and hit with snail. Maybe you hop over and play below curve cross, or an EX cross,
sure,
like, it is
sure,
what it is. Maybe you hop over and you spend March of the Wicked King, and now they can't play focus against that, right? So now they're 2 spaces further away. You drew 4 cards. By the way, you almost always spend the 2 force, because it's just such a good
yeah,
value.
that's
But,
value, right,
and so yes, you might take that 1 gauge hit, but you're advancing your game plan, or at least, you're coming out further ahead than your opponent is. But
right,
but
okay,
that's a personal choice, and it's a situational choice, because there are also other times, you're right, where you hop over and you go, nope, not spending the gauge, not worth it.
okay. But after exceeding, unless you are building up for an ultra payout that we'll get into in a second, that advantage could be spent uh, going into a lot of brawling offense that you now have access to.
Yeah, or creating more space if you have a bunch of these cards still over here and want to build up the gauge. Like, hop over, you have advantage, play an on curve cross, get out of there,
Get
right?
out,
And now
sure,
you're
sure,
across the board doing your thing.
right,
Um, so yeah, the Axel Bomber's a great card. So don't be predictable. You hit them when they're not expecting it,
right, sure,
or when their options are down, right? Make them scramble into it and then lose anyway, because that's how scramble works.
right, right. Everybody who has ever played Scramble has also lost with Scramble.
9 times out of 10, I
Yep,
guarantee you. And if you
seems
tell me
it
you
seems
didn't, you're
like it.
lying.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So that's Axel Bomber. Do you have any more questions about it?
Nope, nope. Just wanted to make
Okay,
sure
cool.
that we were covering that part.
So One Vision, if anyone's ever tried to play this card, you get it, but we'll talk about it, right? It's 1 to 2 5/5, so under curve, but you have boosts that can make it on curve, and you can EX it. And because you're not playing it, and you will never play this as a boost.
You'll never boost
Uh,
this, right?
you'll never boost it. But Petersonian and Gearface, what if you want to? No, you're never boosting it. Shut up.
You're never boosting it.
Get out of here. You're not boosting it.
Why are you why are you
It's
never boosting it, Petersonian?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. So anyway, the reason you never boost this is because it requires you to take an action to use it.
And it's not
Um,
cancelable.
and it's not cancelable, and so your opponent, unless they are asleep at the wheel, is just going to strike into you or discard it, and then you don't get to do it, and you lost your awesome ultra, and you lost the card you could have been spending to get 4 force, or so
Right.
to get 2 force to draw 4 cards and push them 2 spaces. Like,
Right.
you know,
Right.
you name it. There's a million reasons you wouldn't want to just throw it away. But yeah, again, if you can get this +2 speed, if you can create some sort of situation where their options are down and you cancel into it, whatever, getting this off, hit draw 4, gain advantage. After play this as a boost and sustain it, it's your turn again. You have a bunch of cards, and you will take the action to discard this from play and take 3 actions. You
Okay.
cannot cancel during them. So prepare, boost, change cards, boost, change cards, boost, strike, right?
Right.
Notice also it's an action. You can boost, cancel, and then take this action. So
Oh, okay.
you could theoretically take like 6 actions if you happen to have 7 guard when you hit with this, I guess. But like
Right.
you could, right? So this is just do all the things, create an unbeatable strike, and then win.
Right. And well, you just hit with a 4 gauge ultra to do that, but then this went to your gauge. So you do have something to cancel with, even
No,
if
no,
that
no,
was
no,
your
no,
last
no, no,
gauge.
not in your
Oh,
gauge. It's boosted.
it play it as a boost and sustain it. Okay, so that's what you're saying. Like in order to get that, if you're trying to cancel into it with your +1 speed boost to make it on curve, now you need
Yeah.
5 gauge. Now you need
Yes.
another gauge on top of that, because this is going even more gauge
Yep.
negative than an ultra normally would, because
But I
it's
guess
not
I'll say
being
this. I'll say this. Realistically, it's not that hard to hit with this raw anyway.
right.
Because looking at most characters, if you look at the range 6 options, um, either
For
you can wait till they're down, or if you're initiating something, people typically assume you are initiating with something at speed 6.
Sure. Sure.
It's not that they can't call you out on it. This is the whole mix-up thing, but typically people assume you're trying to be safe, especially Axel. People are assuming Axel's trying to be safe. So you initiate with this, and they respond with focus. They respond with sweep. They respond with like block, right? And you then get to do your thing.
Right.
Right. Oh, I traded down against sweep, but then I drew 4 and gained advantage, and I get to take 3 actions in a row and strike.
And I'll
Um,
probably win the next strike pretty hard because of that.
Yeah, so I am paranoid and try to play it safely, but I know plenty of people who play this just at range 2 all the time and
Right.
connect with it. So, personal preference, play it how you wanna play it, but you can play this by itself and still hit probably the majority of the time.
Right.
Okay, Sickle Storm. So you have a defensive option. It's, kind of this is another version of a reversal. It's like reversals don't have to be dragon punches. So DPs, Shoryukens, the 7 speed at range 2 sort of deals. This is more like Sagat from season 3. If anyone hasn't watched the Sagat video, this is like
Tiger
Tiger
uppercut.
Punch.
Tiger
Tiger
uppercut.
uppercut. That's
Yeah.
right, Tiger uppercut.
Yep.
Where it's a guarded range 1 to 2, guarded in armor. So if someone, comes in on you, you're still hitting them, which is the idea of like, the dragon punches. You're mashing this to hit them,
Right.
as they come in. This can come in, they can come in and hit you, or you can come in and hit them. And 5 damage is more than you've got on most of your other attacks, right? So like 6 damage, 5 damage, 5 damage. Like this is where your damage is locked and your normals. And the
Right.
normals are the key to Axel, right? You're
Right.
killing them with your normals.
Okay.
Boost is okay. Idealism, look at the top 3 cards of your deck. You may boost or strike with one of them, discard the rest. So like if you need it, you need it. Yeah, it kind of happens. I feel like I often use this as either an attack or as force, but I've definitely used idealism before. You know,
Right.
it's it's
So
it's flexibility. The idea is, and I like this. So while we're talking about this, like these 2 ultra boosts, the idea behind them is Axel in Source is a time traveler.
yeah.
So whereas everybody else is in the far-flung future of the dystopian Guilty Gear world, he's like just a dude from London who's like, oh no, now I'm in the future.
Right,
I
right,
miss my girlfriend. And so this is him looking into the future, and this is him freezing time, right?
right, right. So when we're talking about, like, now that we're talking about his alters as attacks and his sort of gauge payout, uh, I've got 3 gauge earmarked to exceed. I've
Hmm.
got 4 gauge and 2 gauge as ultra costs. 2 gauge does not seem that hard, even on top of the three. Like I could imagine hitting
No,
hitting
very,
five
very
gauge.
easily. Yeah,
Yeah,
very
that's
easily.
very very playable, even with a 3 gauge exceed cost that I need to hit. But is Axel the kind of character, because he has a lot of fairly consistent attacks, especially in sort of uninteractable positions? Is he the kind of
Mhm.
person who could conceivably build up, they're like season 6 characters build up 7 gauge by sneezing, right? Like they don't even care about
Yeah,
that. Is this the kind of character who can do that, or is 7 like
no.
kind of pushing
And
it?
here's why not. Nope, nope. And here's why not. So the Axel counterplay, right? So let's cover that first. It's kind of a
Okay.
decent moment. We mentioned
Okay.
it briefly. Axel counterplay, get to range one, hit him hard enough that like you have a life advantage, right? And if you can tack advantage onto that, like actually gaining advantage, where you take 2 turns in a row,
Right.
that's how you beat Axel, especially if you can do that before he exceeds, right?
Okay.
Now, not every character is equipped to do that. So there are characters who will struggle more into Axel and characters who will do better into Axel. I mean, okay, so I mentioned this to you earlier when we were talking about this in preparing for the video. So I love playing May.
Yeah.
May doesn't mind playing into Axel because May has a lot of cards that move her to range one, do a lot of damage, and gain advantage. And so she can just keep her ball rolling and hit
Right.
Axel where, like, we just talked about all these brawling tools he has, Axel Bomber, One Vision, Sickle Storm, and then all of his normals. But, like, if Axel is put into a position where he has to, defend with, wild swings on defense, most
They
of
all suck
his
close up, right?
they all suck at range one. Like
Right.
he's going to wild swing, and either if you're on curve so that you're beating, his normals, especially if they're slower, or if he's wild swinging his specials, like that's how you're going to beat him most easily. Just
Okay.
advantage chain him at range one. Play Lychee, and just advantage chain Axel to death, and move on to your next match. Right? Like
Right.
that is Axel crumpling. But if you can't advantage chain into Axel, so you come into range one and you're like, I'm gonna hit Axel for whatever, right? Axel is going to, I'll move Grasp out of here, although you can just hit with Grasp. Axel is going to use these 5 boosts.
Okay.
So Axel is going to push you or pull you with area shift, which
Yep.
everyone in season 7 has,
Yep.
especially if you can pull you over them, which we didn't mention this, but like if you play season 7, this is a great way to get a gauge. So if you need that 3rd gauge and you don't want to strike, pull them over you, get the 3rd gauge, don't cancel, draw a card, it's your turn next turn,
Proceed next
you
turn,
know,
retreat, right? All that
exceed
stuff.
you. Oh, you hit me for a strike. Oops, I hope I had focus or something. But like now I
Right.
exceed, right? And then
Right.
my game plan's on. I drew cards. That's the thing. So anyway,
Right.
so that's out of the way. But let's say you're not worried about exceeding. Pull them, get the gauge, cancel, and then use slow waker, which I always think is slow walker, which just cracks me up because I don't know, he's a slow walker, I guess. But anyway, slow waker.
I've read that card name or that boost name so many times, and I always mentally put in an L. That's so
It's Slow Walker. I
it's
wrote the
called
guide for him on BGG, and I wrote Slow Walker, and
it's
D had to
called
correct it.
it's been called a slow waker this whole time.
Yes.
That's so funny. Okay, but all right, it's your retreat boost.
It's your retreat boost. So you pull them past you, cancel, and then retreat, and then cancel again, and you
Cancel,
strike.
and now
It
you're on your
it
offense, right?
costs 2 gauge, right? But now you attack from an uncontestable place. You do some damage, and you get a gauge back. So essentially, it
Right.
costs you 1 gauge to get some damage.
Right.
That's great. Axel loves that. Okay, you've got him in the corner. Well, he's got assault, which we looked at earlier, which everyone has, which is the advanced 3, right?
Right.
And then he's also got advanced 2 or 3, and both of these are cancelable. So they've got you cornered. Great, hop over them.
Right.
If you don't have cross to just back up immediately, then advance over them and do this immediately, right? Or boost this and cancel that, or boost this and don't cancel that. You have +1
Right.
speed, and you're now at range, what, 4? It range 3. I'm
Yeah.
doing my math. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think you're 4. Yeah, you're at range 4 with +1 speed on a character that has all of this going on, right? Like,
Right.
as soon as Axel has some gauge, look at the
He
redundancy.
he's incredibly hard to pin down. He is
Because look
like
at all
the
these boosts.
yeah.
And this
All
is the
these
thing,
movement boosts make him
as a
very difficult to
new
corner.
main,
Right.
and I mentioned this in my video, one of the things that I love about new is that feeling of scrapping on the seat of my, or at the edge of my seat, the seat of my pants, scrapping on the seat of my pants. That sounds like a thing you need medicine for that. Hopefully
Right.
there's a
Yeah.
prescription. I've been scrapping on the seat of my pants. Gear face, I need you to help me. But so anyway, so after I've been diagnosed improperly with a digestive issue,
Right.
I love the feeling of being like absolutely tapped for resources and needing to play them perfectly to escape from a situation where I can regain the upper hand, right?
Right. Right.
Axel goes, nah, forget that. What if I had 6 of every tool that I would ever need to just put myself where I want to be and draw a bunch of cards and have +1 speed and then cancel into it and don't even give you a chance to react to me? Um, it's
So
very annoying to play against.
so
It can feel very powerful to play as.
in theory though, so
Yes.
this is something you segued into this by talking about counterplay. This is something that he has a lot of redundancy of, and a lot of ways to get away from you and to restart his offense, and you're canceling to do it. In
Yes.
theory, you are keeping yourself away from your win condition by doing that, and that's why
Well,
you.
you've already exceeded. Like it is a
Oh,
non-trivial thing to exceed. Like it just
okay,
is. We talk about, so Axel will exceed.
okay.
I don't think there's ever been a game I played as Axel where I didn't exceed,
Where
right?
you
No one
didn't
can kill you that fast.
at some point have 3 gauge. Okay,
You will have 3 gauge, whether it's between area shift, whether it's between boosting faultless defense, and then they have to pass a turn.
and then you block
Um,
once and you're fine, right? Like
you can play Let's Rock from a far enough distance that they can't really do anything about it, because you can't cancel Let's Rock, right? So you draw 1, hit +1 power, add this to gauge. You won't do this often because you love range 3, speed 7 grasp so much that, like, I don't recommend it, but if you can, you can. Like, you will
right,
get gauge, right? Because you still have sweep, you still
right.
have focus, you still have block. Okay, you went out to range whatever. Now just play block.
Right.
It is what it
Sure.
is, right?
You get
The
gauge.
season 3 dynamic. I need a gauge. Let me play block at range 4.
Sure.
But so you will get to 3 gauge. You will exceed. So your question is, how much did they manage to hit me before I exceeded?
Right.
And then can I keep hitting them often enough that I have the gauge to cancel to do the things? So that is the theoretical counterplay against Axel, which is why I said that advantage chaining is so crucial
You're
against
not
him if you
you're not
can do it.
you're not giving him that ability to do all this crazy stuff on, because it's got to be his turn to boost all that stuff. And
Yep.
you segued into this from my initial question was like, how much gauge is he generating? Is it possible really to assume that I'm going to have 7 gauge across these things? And the
Yes.
answer, it seems like, is no, because
Well, no, no, no. The answer is yes, but toward the end of the game.
okay, sure, because the mid game is going to be spent canceling with these various uh, movement boosts in order to continually restart my offense at the position I want it to be at.
If a character doesn't allow you to zone, or sorry, doesn't
Right,
allow you. Yeah, yeah, like, because some characters have a lot of guarded movement and will just
right.
constantly be moving in on you,
If
or
they
they
if
have
they
amazing movement.
if they make you use these, you will
Yep.
use these and you will spend gauge to do it, and it won't delay this. You're saying it'll delay these.
Yes. And the
Got it.
thing is, and I mentioned this earlier, like, you won't win a game running away as Axel.
Right. You need to fight up close at some point because that's where all your damage is.
At some point, you'll go in. And so when you do go in, you've got, so these are all over here again, right? And just keep
Right.
those all there. Uh, you've got +1 speed, positioning, and cancel.
Yep.
+1 power, cancel. Everyone's got,
Badass.
badass
Yep.
cancel, just EX cancel. You, you can scramble, and then all these things that you have that like are less reactable. You can increase your chances of landing that damage you need at the end.
Right.
And then there's this too, like maybe I'm just being spoiled by playing on the browser client that's been developed recently by DT, and
Mhm.
people are helping out with that. So if people
Yeah.
haven't used it, they should. It's a lot of fun. But being able to see everyone's options at a glance, like, has just been reinforcing for me. And also kind of
How
showing me
good
a
Perry
weak a
is.
weakness of my TTS play, because in TTS I will sometimes just like play by gut and ignore the person's discard and be like, I think that's down, right? Instead of
Right.
checking for it.
Right.
And then I'll lose to something that I thought was down that, wasn't. If you can look at the options they have available to you, if you're tracking it, or if go back and check, um, and you realize like, oh, they've only got one slow card that contests any of this, or they only have one card that's speed 5 at this range, or they have one grasp left, right? Then read it. I said not read it, parry it. Worst case scenario, you see their hand,
Right.
and now you know how to pick it apart based on what you're holding. You know what's safer now, because again, we kind of covered this. You are a character who can play safe, unreactable strikes, and if you know that everything in their hand can't react with something, then you go, oh, okay, sure, I'll just do that, right? Like, I'll pause brawling for a second and just do more of this,
And just
or
get
you
rid of
remove
that.
the one
Sure.
card that would stop you from doing something here, and then you do that, right? Like,
Right.
it is huge. This is not a plug for this in, like, relation to Axel. This is a plug for block and parry in relation to everyone. People should be parrying more. Maybe
Right.
this is old knowledge for some people, but it's a great card.
Yeah. So we've got our like macro game
I
plan,
mean,
and we've talked about the. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm gonna cut you off because I can't stress this enough. Like, you need to close a game.
Mhm.
How would you like, because you are exceeded, like we said, you are
Right.
exceeded, right?
Right.
So how would you like all of your normals to be +0 to 2 range, +1 speed? How would you like all of your normals to be +0 to 2 range, +1 power, or EX, or all three of them if you have the gauge? Like, oh, I can't play one vision because I don't have 4 gauge. Okay, I'll just use my 3 gauge to create a +2 speed, +2 power, +2 range
Yep.
attack.
Unstoppable Axel Bomber, unstoppable other copy of Sweep, stuff like that. Like so you like
Yeah,
so it what it sounds like is once you've exceeded, thank you for setting them up in this way. Once you've exceeded, here are the things that you use to get rid of your problems, right? I guess block might be over here as well. These are like these boosts, block, all that stuff is what you're using to diffuse your opponent's offense. Everything over here is what you're using to kill them. And
yeah.
it kind of feels like you get to play jazz at that point. You're like, well, this seems like it works, this seems like it works, and it'll probably all just work fine because I have a strong character ability and I can cancel things
And
into.
And
Go ahead.
this is a thing that he has that New doesn't. Like, yeah, not to cut you off and like steer it in a
Sure.
different direction. I think you're onto something. And again, we'll draw the comparison to New because New is this again, the hyper zoner, and Axel is a hyper zoner.
Right.
But New, and we mentioned this, has a hard time coming back from a life deficit. Because New has to keep playing keep away, has very few finishers, right? Has a few, and the
Right.
normals are great when they're plus range and all that, but like the finishes are not as accessible as say these things. Um, Axel can set up finishers
Yeah. He
that can come back. He can create uncontestable high damage moves if he needs to,
right.
in a way that New never could.
I
And so you're like, "Oh, I'm down 7 life." Well, I can craft an attack that will make that back up now
right.
if I need to.
I was talking to Reggie yesterday about Leo, and he referred to cancels as a mechanic as build your own ultra.
Yes,
where you're
exactly what they are.
basically like, all right, well, I have the component pieces of Voltron in my hand here, and it's not an
Yes.
Ultra. It doesn't have the red border on it at the top, but I could turn this into something that is really stupid.
Well, and
Um,
some characters, that is essentially their character ability.
yeah,
Has someone done a Geo guide with you yet, or the video like recorded, or
not yet. No.
because Geo as a character is draw all the cards, right?
Right.
Which is kind of an underwhelming ability, and a lot of people don't look at their kit and they're like, "Oh, this is kind of underwhelming what she's got." And I don't disagree with them. I don't know how strong Geo is, but Geo's secret sauce is she hits frequently, so she has gauge, and she has cards that generate gauge.
Right.
All of her cards are mediocre until you start tacking the boosts onto those cards, and especially onto the normals.
Right.
And suddenly she's a build your own uninteractable 2 gauge ultra every turn if you want to.
Right. Sure. So the reason that I was wondering, so like I mentioned, it's kind of like you're playing jazz at some point, and like you will the skill testing part of that part of the game is diffusing your opponent's offense, which you have ample tools to do, and um finding those because they're there, right? Like as you said, you put +2 speed, +2 power, plus your range on basically any normal and you're feeling pretty good. But finding them
Yeah,
in
yeah.
your hand, finding them in your deck, finding ways to make what you need is a skill testing thing, and it might be something that you need to like find like feel out with experience. In the early
Yeah.
game, before you
Yeah,
have
yeah,
the
and
ability to
try things out, right? Like, if you have someone who's willing to play games with you, this is the thing that, like, for me, is a mentality. Other people I know look at a character like this, and they kind of, like, in their head, they're kinda crunching all the numbers and analyzing and going, "Oh, this is the optimal play pattern," and, like,
right,
and I love those people because I play against them, and I just feel naked, and they tell me what I'm doing as I'm doing it, and I just
right,
stand before them and, like, get shredded, and then learn from that, right?
yeah,
I am very much a person who pushes all the buttons and sees what happens.
yeah,
And so a character like this, like I found someone who's like willing to run new into this character. And I said, okay, can I fight you at range 8? Answer no, because
not
new has
really,
enough.
no,
New's
yeah,
built to be a zoner forever. Axel needs to switch, right? My damage couldn't keep up. New could shut it down.
right,
New was getting engaged. New has the ultra that dodges everything and then does a ton of damage, and then she gains advantage like at range 8. So like Axel needs to brawl, right? And
yeah,
then you play against other characters and you go, "Can I just brawl?" And the characters are like, "No, you can't, because I will just advantage chain your face to death." And so like there's an experiential wisdom of like knowing when to switch and when you can switch, and it makes it sound like it's more complicated than it actually is, but
mhm,
definitely play around with him because you'll feel it, right? You'll see where the opportunity
yeah,
cost is, and those moments like we talked about, like, sometimes you do spend gauge on front side, sometimes you just take a hit, sometimes they're at range 1 and you just wild swing and say, "Yeah, I'll eat this, but next turn I will get to do my thing and run out and make up the life difference and have a bunch of gauge and do my thing." So
right,
like it's building that confidence of knowing like what can I get away with? How far can I let them push me before I need to do something? Like when am I spending this? Because yeah, like he's so versatile. Way
it
more versatile than he feels like, because you look at this ability and you go, "Oh, I'm a zoner." You look at him having 4 of this card, you go, "Oh, I'm a zoner."
oh, yeah. So but also like when we're discussing the jazz thing, like this is from a position of strength, right? You are able to like it is hard to find these combos if you're new and figuring out how to do these things, but that's a good problem to have because this is when the character is at their strongest. Like so
Mhm.
test that stuff out, find that stuff because this is when your character is kind of cooking and you'll figure out some cool things to do and it'll probably work because you have at this point you're at your best. Axel's at his best self at that point. So my question
Mhm.
is, eh, let's give sort of more uh concrete advice rather than sort of like the more jazz advice when he's at his weakest. So I'm wondering like now we're at beginning of the game. I need to get to that point where I can play jazz. What am I like mulliganing for? What am I doing in the very early game? You said that I'm gonna exceed, and I probably will. But my opponent is trying to delay that, stop that, get me to a point where I've traded down so much that even my awesome brawling tools aren't enough.
Okay.
Am I trying to
So,
speed up as fast as I can? Am I trying to be safe in the early game? Like what is the super early
uh,
game plan when I'm
you
weak?
you wanna be safe when you can. and you just want to generate gauge. So look at your opponent's kit, right? Like I'm just gonna move this out of the way for now. So if you are player one, and this will stuff a fast dive, sickle flash, which a lot of characters have fast dives right now. So
Right.
this is a very safe turn one opener. You push them to range 5, they have to do some shenanigans to get back in, right? If you're playing against the odd character that has
Like Dan,
uh,
like
speed 6
yeah, Dan.
something,
The
I just played against Seth a
yeah
game ago
the
with this, like,
the fastest fast dives, the fasterest
don't
dives.
don't play this, play
Right.
sweep, because
Right.
sweep is actually range 5, right?
Right.
And it's who cares if sweep is speed 2 or speed 1? It doesn't really make a difference unless you're trying to not lose to another sweep that has
Right.
+1 power on it, right? Like, so these are great opening cards, sickle flash and sweep, just mash those, they're great. Cross is also great because it's speed 5 at range 4 as an opening thing and gets you back to the corner, which you don't mind being in the corner because, unlike New, who needs to retreat to make space, push, push, wherever
Lots of it.
grass went, push,
Lots of boosts that advance you out of the corner too.
push.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you can advance out of the corner if you need to for free, like
Right.
anytime you want. So you don't mind going to the corner with cross. It's an opener that you can use that we talked about not using it as New, but you can use it as Axl.
Right.
I mean, this is on curve if you want to do this on curve, and then your range 5, and it is what it is. So, like, you have so many opening things, and you can look at the opponent. If your opponent's a zoner, then you have to make some actual decisions. Like, that's I think the only time, if they have guarded fireballs, right? If your opponent has guarded fireballs, or so some of them have range 1 to 2, 3 to 4 guard before close 3. Like, some people
Like
have that. I think
a
Soul's got one of them.
you talk about like a Tatsu.
Something Tatsu-ish,
Sure.
even.
Sure.
Not always a Tatsu, but like whatever, right? Like, okay, then maybe you don't play Sickle Flash. Maybe again you're playing Sweep because they're going to come in and you'll trade. So
Right.
like those are all considerations you're making, but the goal ultimately is based on your opponent's kit. Play something that you know is going to connect,
Right.
and then
And so
just keep playing things that can connect. So, mull for these if they don't have the stuff, mull for your normals if you do have the stuff. Like we just said, cross is still great at speed 6, range 3. So like keep a cross in hand, have some focus, have some sweep. So the sickle flashes are good, snails are good, like all of the kind of like uninteractive stuff, or the defensive melee stuff for when your opponent who knows what they're doing doesn't let you just sit at range 5 and they move into range 1 and you have to play these things.
right. So now we've got kind of like the very first strike covered. My opponent, as I said, like this is coming from the part of the game where you're at the point of weakness, so I kind of feel the need to elaborate a little bit further on that. Like my opponent is gonna run in right away. Am I looking for an escape option early on, or does that just mean like, okay, it's time to brawl, or is it just that I have so many escape options that I don't really need to mull for them because I'm probably gonna have one?
So typically what I do a lot is boost faultless defense, have the +4 guard. You can still play cross, grasp, like hit most things. So most things that they're going to play that would stun cross or grasp won't do 5
Won't do
damage.
more than four, right?
Yeah, won't do more than 4. So like, and then if they do something, you get the gauge anyway. So like, there's a bit of kind of just getting creative, using your tools, and just kind of confirming the damage. Yeah, you can just advance 3 and draw a card, and then make them come back to you again. Like again, we just talked about all of the things that you have access to. Like you have more tools than they do to change your position. So unless they're striking, and then you have to make a decision what to respond with, like you can kind of just run away for a while if you want to. Like that's an
Okay.
option as well.
Okay.
And then it's also always good for you because you're draining them of their resources, because
Mm.
the more things that you see go down on them, you this is a good way to think about this, because we kind of talked about it a few times. Like you have redundancies, you have things you want to do, and you will eventually get to use one of your tools that does those things.
But
Your
you got
opponent
another one.
does
Yeah.
your opponent does not have the same level of redundancy in their kit. Ryu certainly doesn't, right? Ryu has, 2 of each tool that he wants. And so, if you can get Ryu to burn the tools that he has and then, do your thing. And just watch out for people that have lots of guard
Right.
and closing.
Right. What about his so I had a kind of like an economy question. I know that March of the Wicked King, this boost is crazy. You spend an ultra to draw 4 and push.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That actually almost seems like a parry target to me. That's bonkers economy. It's also like the only economic card that he really seems to have, right? Other than he's got a couple draw effects on his attacks, right?
You
So
you
are
will
there
so yeah, so you will prepare as him, right? There's some characters
right?
you never have to prepare as. You will prepare as Axel, but also until the end of the game, these tend to be
These are just
force.
force. Okay, so
Not
these
always. I mean, yeah, again, situationally,
right,
almost always force.
right. But you've kind of anticipated my question there that like if I do need to change cards, it's probably going to be with these just because they're higher value. And if I don't have access to March of the Wicked King, well, okay, well drawing 3, drawing 2 force and then drawing at the end of turn, that's still pretty good value for my force. That's fine. But these are my economic engines that I'm going to need to maintain. And also because I am going to need to prep sometimes, I could do it at a range where they can't do anything about it, right? I can prep as a punish tool. If I'm all the way over here, they're all the way over here. They can't hit me right now anyway. It's still early game. I could conceivably take that time to reload my resources if I needed to.
And you can do silly things with idealism too, because idealism being look at the top 3 cards. Like I can CC this card to draw 3, or I can look at the top 3 and boost or strike with the one that I need, right? Like there's a bit of action compression. You sacrifice the other 2 cards, but it's just how do you want to play?
Right.
And I
Do
don't think he plays jazz. He probably plays like the Who guitar riffs, right? Like
oh just right. Okay, yeah.
a lot of
He plays a lot of Pete Townsend. That this works for the sort of British the
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
guy on the streets of London vibe. That works for me. Well, no, he plays Queen, or he plays
Well, I think he
he plays
plays
Guns N'
Guns N'
Roses. Of
Roses,
course,
but the
yeah,
problem is that's an American band,
right,
so, like, I don't know, get your branding right, Guilty Gear.
yeah.
What
Come
are you
on,
from,
guys,
not America? Come
come on,
on,
guys.
people from not America.
So that's the kit. That's the counterplay. We've talked about economy. Is there anything else about the kit itself that you wanted to cover? Any sort of mindset or strategy stuff that you wanted to go into, or is that
Just
pretty much
that
what you
you've
wanted
got
to say?
2 phases you move between. Yeah, don't get caught in any one of them, especially don't get caught in thinking you have to zone the entire game. That
Okay,
like it's probably if there's anything that if there's anything that people picking up Axel for the first time are going to run into, it's that they're going to think that they want to zone forever and they don't.
okay, gotcha. So, and hold on a second, we got a couple cards over here, and I feel like some of these boosts don't really require a ton of explanation on the normals. You mentioned Let's Rock, for example, just to make sure because we went fast here, right? This is by far going to be the shortest lesson I've ever done. One of and we've been talking fast. Let me make sure I got this. It's like
I got you.
great gauge generation. Parry's always awesome. Um, Economy boost is incredible. Lets you convert into brawling when
Yeah.
you need to.
Well, we can do this. If anybody's ever watched this, this is like it's a
Totally.
boost
It's a boost,
or
it's
it's an
an
attack,
attack.
right?
Yep.
This is an
This could
attack
be both.
when it wins. It's an
Yeah.
attack when it wins,
Right.
most often a boost,
Okay.
right? This is I guess we can take it down here. I don't know where your camera is. I'll just move down the row.
Sure, go for it. I'm
We'll
I'm
we'll
centered
do
here. Yeah.
okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah, we'll bring it down here.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is either the slash. Hey, listen, if you can get some advantage going and you know that that's going to close you the game, like do it. If that's also ready, hit with a slash from a distance, get your last gauge, get advantage, exceed, go
Retreat back
back
out.
to draw
Yeah.
to, yeah. So like also totally fine, but then also advance 3. You'll probably use the advance 3 more than you'll use slash. It just tends to come up more often, but totally fine to play slash when it comes up because slash is a great card.
Sure.
Snail probably more as an attack because the redundancy is you can just use this. I'd rather hit with this than I would with slash.
Right.
So like I'll hit with this and I'll advance 3 with this if I have to, right?
Right.
But So usually an attack. This is usually an attack, but you have 4 of them. So I guess do whatever you want with this card. This card's usually a boost.
Yep. Okay.
This card's usually an attack, unless
you've got
we talked about it's not safe, right? It's not a safe card. It is very much a mid speed. So if you can plus power a safe card that's going to win you way more, do that. But this card's great. Attack with it as well. You know, it's good. This is both.
Right.
One Vision is only an attack.
Right.
Sickle Storm is a great attack. It's a great boost, and it's great 2/4. But this is not like you don't have to hit with this or boost it. It's like when it's good, it's good. You know, situational. But that's a power budget question, right? Okay, cool. Cross, you'll do both of these. It's both. It's all of that. Dust is more like Winter Mantis. Like, if you can hit with this as an attack, do it. It's 5 uninteractable from a long range. But a lot of times you'll boost this because you'd rather have a safer attack in that 1 to 2 range when you can't, you want something to connect, so you boost the power of the guard. And then if they let you have the gauge, then great, just take the gauge.
That sounds great.
This is, again, dive when you want to dive. We already talked about that. It's funny because it hits from range 1, which no other card, like most other characters, don't hit from range 1 with dive.
It's you and Cammy. The two Brits.
Brits.
If you're British, your dives can hit at range 1.
Have you ever seen someone post the? I guess in the latest Street Fighter, I don't play fighting games. I only live vicariously the fighting game life through all the Exceed players,
right?
Through Exceed, and all the people posting things about her, where her victory is she starts swinging her arms around in these weird crossing patterns, and then someone pointed out she's making all of the lines on the British flag.
The British flag.
And it's it's like no one is as British as Cammy is.
Yeah.
Or you will never be as British as Cammy. It's Cammy and Axl, right? Those are the only two.
You can tell how British they are by the fact that their dives hit at range 1. I think that's what we've.
Exactly what I'm assuming all British people hit with dive at range 1.
Yeah, that's the takeaway from this lesson. In fact.
Yeah, cut everything else out if you can. Just shorten the video.
Yep. So great dive.
But yeah, so play it if it'll hit, right? And then often you'll use this because discarding a continuous boost is great always. Like seasons 1 through 5, no one ever complained about teching something.
Sure.
But in season 7, you can tech and then take another action if you have the gauge for it. So great, awesome. This is again, Sweep is such a good card for you. Focus is such a good card for you because this is really range 1 to 5 all the time. This is really range 1 to 4 all the time. So you will most often strike with these defensively a lot, but oftentimes offensively too, because you can call someone out. They think you're doing a thing, and then no, I'm not. I just hit you. I hit your cross, right? Even from range 1, if they initiate cross at range 1, you'll hit them with focus. It's good. But then, of course, build your own ultra, play Jazz. If you can make a card EX that just wins, make it win. If you want to try and secure a payout, use Scramble. If you need the extra gauge from hitting, play Let's Rock. If you need the cards, maybe that's what you need. But oftentimes, Grasp is just an attack because...
Right. But even for these ones in particular, even when you're in Exceed mode, I'm looking at his kit, and in those really bad scenarios where you are at range 1 and your opponent is threatening you, you don't have a ton of particularly good defensive options. These two especially, you kind of need those.
So if you need to trade back, I hope you have one of these, right? Or I hope you have Sickle Storm. But and again, we talked about this. If you go, well, I don't have them, Wild Swing, take your loss, and then do your thing.
Do your thing on your
turn now.
You're a season 7 character. You win on your turn.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's Axl.
That all makes sense. I do believe then, Petersonian,
the jury's out. People can decide if they, is he busted or is he not busted? I don't know. We'll the tournaments show.
I would love to know. I think that we have set the land speed record for an excess exceed. Honestly, is this excessive? Is this excess exceed anymore? Is it just regular? Welcome
adequate
to
exceed.
Welcome to adequate exceed.
For adequacy.
Yeah,
adequate exceed.
All right, we got there.
It's just enough. Any
It's
more and go.
it's the very first episode of my new show, Adequate Exceed, where we cover a character in about an hour and 15 minutes. Petersonian, that was great. Thank you so much for this primer on Axl. I hope that people go out and figure him out and play him a little bit and get a sense of him. Everybody watching, thank you so much for your time and your attention. I will see you for the next one. See you, everybody.